You know, sometimes I look back at old Splatoon tournament sets and remember really stupid decisions that happened. And it got me thinking, what were 10 of the dumbest choices that have happened throughout the Splatoon game's history? Today, I want to share just how bad some of these choices were at shaping the game's influence, some in more than just the competitive scene. And if you guys really enjoy this, I'll do another one breaking down 10 of the best decisions they've made over time, because there's a lot of good stuff too. But with that being said, I'm gonna go through starting from the least dumb of these 10 to the most. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. Let's start with something small, but really dumb. Splatzone's cheese. Now, there have been a lot of cheese strats throughout the game's history, some even worse than this that we'll get to in a bit, but Splatzone's cheese is by far the funniest one they've put in the game. This affects two main specials, Reef Slider and Ink Vacuum. These both got a radius increase, which sounds nice for the damage, but has the side effect of increasing the paint radius enough to the point where it can flip an entire splat zone by itself. This means that if anyone has a Reef Slider or a Vac that's sufficiently charged and are close enough to be able to use it on top of a zone, you can reset the entire penalty. The only reason this is so low on the list is the specials that can do this are relatively weak, and only pausing the zone's timer isn't as strong as other forms of cheese we'll get to later. Still, when trying to make a special better, this is one of the worst ways you can go about it, and has resulted in something like Reef Slider that is literally only good for cheese and nothing else. Number 9, Old Ink Armor HP. So, back in the amazing good old days of Splatoon 2, there was an infamous meta with Triple Tri-Slosher and Rapid Blaster that people are pretty familiar with. But one part that I think a lot of people forgot about is why Ink Armor was especially broken when Splatoon 2 came out. And this is because of a really odd decision. When Ink Armor got removed, there was a period of time before you could take extra damage while the armor itself was being removed. And at the start of the game, this was really long for some reason. The patch after this did fix that by shortening the period of invulnerability after Ink Armor was destroyed by 8 entire frames, which might not sound like a lot, but given that there were 3 Ink Armors on every team chaining to all 4 players, that starts to add up and made people really difficult to kill without armor. And this is only one part of it. Attacks over 100 damage also didn't deal any piercing damage to the user, nor much extra knockback, meaning you could tank a charger shot and not even have to worry about being pushed back or taking a bit of damage. The special really was a lot stupider at the beginning of the game than what it ended up with. Another really odd buff is the one to Last Ditch Effort. Now, Last Ditch Effort originally gave 8 entire subs of Ink Saver main, sub, and recovery up, but only activated at the last 30 seconds, or when the timer on the objective reached under 30. However, a buff happened where it started to apply starting at 50 or below. This, alongside with bombs being a bit stronger in Splatoon 2 compared to 3, led to a meta of having multi-bombs, Last-Ditch Effort activating incredibly easily, and being able to just spam an absolute ton of bombs while having plenty of an ability to paint. This was felt most on tower control, where you would have some teams with 4 Last-Ditch Effort bombs just spamming them at the tower where nobody can get on. It's one of those changes that doesn't sound as bad as it actually is, but it was pretty bad. And it took until later into Splatoon 3 for the amount of subs you get to finally be reduced, alongside those bomb nerfs, which means that now while it's strong, it's no longer as oppressive as it was in that game. Number 7, the poll update. So, the poll update was stupid in a lot of reasons, but there's one I want to highlight. Eeltail Alley. This is pretty much the only time a stage rework has drastically affected how bad a stage is. With Eeltail, this made it so this bottom left side, which used to have a ramp here, now was changed to have the ramp removed. Eeltail Alley is currently the worst lockout stage of all time, as opponents holding on the bridge have an extreme advantage because with that ramp gone, the only ways to push to even contest the bridge are one-way drops, and the only way back is walking through uninkable glass. In other words, this change made the stage go from bad to horrible, and affects it way more than people realize. And I can't think of any other stage change change to be this negative. Number 6, the rework of Baller. So, very late into Splatoon 2, Baller got a change making it weight class dependent, along with drastically increasing the amount of time it takes before it explodes when you choose to detonate it. This class change was really cool if you were a lightweight weapon, in which you get a faster Baller with better handling. For medium weight weapons, nothing happened. However, if you were a heavyweight weapon, you got slapped with another nerf, as your Baller is now the slowest in the game, which was actually only one weapon, the custom X-Splosher, which means if you were an Expo player, your main kit got stuck with a worse version of the special than any other weapon in the game. It is hilarious just how horrible Heavy Baller felt by the end of Splatoon 2. And while I think this rework had some interesting ideas, the fact that only lightweight weapons got the trade-off while everyone else got a worse special, some even worse than others, was a hilariously poor attempt to fix it. Number 5, the nerfs to Splatoon 1's top tiers. This is mainly going over weapons like the Mini Spotling, Range Blaster, Dynamo Roller, and H3. At the end of Splatoon 1, the devs really over-worried about just how good some of Splatoon 1's best weapons were, and they got nerfed really drastically. The main sad part about this is it still affects some of the weapons today. Some of these weapons eventually recovered from the nerfs, like Range Blaster or Mini Spotling, for example, and stuff like H3 still got most of the stuff reverted. However, other weapons, such as the Dynamo Roller, have literally never recovered from this. It seems really strange knowing just how careful the devs are about nerfing things now, how horrible things were at the beginning. And it seems like a strange decision when Splatoon 2 already had many ways of nerfing some of these weapons indirectly. Number 4, Clam Blitz Super Jumping. This is the other form of cheese that's even worse, and this one has been in the game since the very beginning of this mode being added, which is the ability to not only super jump with the football, but throw it pretty much immediately on landing, meaning outside of very perfectly timed bombs with only a matter of frames to blow up at the right time, good luck with that, there is basically no way to stop this jump. This resulted in the infamous Clam Blitz cheese, where you have ink brushes and splooshes flanking in solo to try to get one power clam to jump in, or competitive play where you have people trying to rush the basket with a baller or tent with a bunch of bubble blowers, or now more infamously, Splatoon 3's Kraken and Tacticooler combo, with a near instant quick super jump, fast respawn, and all of your special being saved to an invincible special that can be immune to knockback, lasting longer than even Baller did at the end of that game's life. This has been the main blemish on what should be one of the best modes in the game, and the problem has only gotten worse. Number 3, Mahi Other Modes changes. Now, honestly, the entirety of Splatoon 3's map design and reworks from Splatoon 1 could have been on this list, but I think it would be a bit too long. So I chose to go over what I thought would be the worst example of this rework. And while Hammerhead Bridge is certainly up there, I think Mahi having Tower Control, Rainmaker, and Clam Blitz layouts that, unlike the Zones ones which somewhat match the Splatoon 1 layout, especially post-rework, are basically unrecognizable from the original Splatoon 1 stage, and both the Tower and Rainmaker returning ones are significantly worse in quality. Not only that, when the stage was reworked, they doubled down on this by not changing it back to the original layout, but keeping these uniquely horrible layouts in the game. You have Rainmaker with one of the fastest and most linear paths, Tower going over a trench in the most steamroll way possible, and Clam Blitz, which, while at least a bit larger now, is still one of the most boring and repetitive ways the map could be played out. And considering this comes from one of, if not the best stages in the entire series, it's hard to think of a downgrade worse. Number 2 is a mechanic most people have probably forgotten about. When this game came out back in Splatoon 1 as well as today, your healing takes about 1 second to start. It's a mechanic that you might not remember was actually changed once. At the start of Splatoon 2, the amount of time it took to heal was actually increased from 1 to 1.5 seconds. You might remember Splatoon 2 had a lot of chip damage type stuff. Burst bombs on Tri-Slosher, Rapid Blaster, Sloshing Machine, stuff like Ink Storm when Brella got more popular, and most infamously, Stingray. All of those were hard to deal with, but imagine it taking a half second longer before you can even begin healing from all of these. At the beginning of Splatoon 2, any chip damage weapon was one of the most annoying things to deal with ever, and it was really difficult to recover your health. Half a second might not sound like a lot, but in a game like Splatoon, it absolutely absolutely is, and you can just picture what it'd be like when every time you got burst bombed, anytime you got hit with a rapid or an explo, any crab or Zuka AoE hitting you, imagine that, but you have to wait an extra half second to heal from it, and imagine what this game would be like. And that's not even the worst one. The Stingray of Splatoon 2 is the worst design special they put in the game. A laser you can use from the safety of your spawn that used to deal 25% more damage than it does now, could be used inside of your spawn shield, had a longer duration, better special power-up effect, and so much more before it got nerfed. But before any of those nerfs ever happened, it got one horrible buff. While Stingray was a poorly designed piece of garbage, it was still a piece of garbage at the beginning of Splatoon 2. It wasn't very good, and that's for one simple reason. Stingray did not have shockwaves. It was just the beam in the middle, which at least made it incredibly difficult to hit opponents with and kept it from being the infamous GG special it is now. Shockwaves not only got added, but they were added without them even being weaker than the base hit. Throughout when the game started until the game's end, the shockwaves held the exact same amount of power as hitting someone directly with the beam, drastically reducing the skill required to use the special, making plays with it significantly lamer. And on top of that, it was just the amount of reliability it needed that despite all the nerfs shown here, it ended up being one of the strongest and most oppressive specials in Splatoon 2 and the game's history. Unfortunately, when Splatoon 3 gets changed, there's bound to be some slip-ups. The good news is that most of these changes have either been reverted or worked around in some way. And while some of these persist, I imagine at one point all of them will probably be something that we look back on and find stupid in the past. When looking back, what were some of your least favorite changes to the Splatoon series? Let me know below, and I'll see you guys next time.